everybody. I'm Michael Munson, and I'm happy that folks are joining us and winding their way in tonight. We are going to have a fun, playful storytelling hour and a half. We'll see how long we end up going and how long our storytellers tell stories. But we're really excited that you're here tonight. I am Michael Munson again with Forge, and I just want to take us through some kind of brief introductory things, some housekeeping, and then we'll turn things over to start sharing stories. And so we're going to hear a bunch of truth tonight in our coming out stories. So that's a good segue to shifting us into the next segment, which is we want to thank our funder for this series of events, which is the Advancing a Healthier Wisconsin Endowment at the Medical College of Wisconsin. We've been partnered with Frederick and the Medical College Inclusion Clinic for the last 6 months or so, mainly starting out of COVID, and we're hoping to continue on with some of the work that we're doing. I wanted to just take a moment, if we all can, to acknowledge the death of Monica Roberts. And some of you may know who Monica was, and some of you might not, and I encourage you to find out more about her. She was an amazing leader in Houston who died last week of natural causes. She was just an incredible pioneer who advocated for trans rights. If you'd like to learn more about her, you can go to her blog, which is the Trans Griot blog, and she won the 2018 GLAAD Media Awards for outstanding blogging for that blog that she maintained. Just to give another piece of data about her, she was the co-founder of the National Trans Advocacy Coalition, so something that started a really long time ago. And she wanted people to tell their stories. So it's kind of fitting that we have a moment to reflect on her tonight as we're thinking about telling more stories that hopefully will get recorded in some way and shared in some way. She definitely cared about preserving history, and I'm going to miss her a lot, and her ability to capture Black trans history in particular. And I think our community is really going to miss that voice and her memory in all of those pieces. So the last thing about her that I would want to share is that I know that she would want everybody to vote. So please vote. I'd like to just preface our speakers by reminding everybody that's listening about two things. One is that people are telling their personal stories, and they may use language that you don't use, but I really encourage everybody to respect and honor the language and the stories that are being told. And I also encourage everybody to use the chat feature to uplift and share your appreciation and praise and positive comments while folks are speaking or after they're done. Because sometimes it's hard to tell your story, and I know that all of these people are folks that I know and are probably very confident in telling their stories, but it's always good to hear positive things. So tonight we're going to hear from Core, and then Deirdre, and then Sean, and then Dezjorn. We are going to have Core, who I think is here, and I'm going to pop back off, and Core, if you can introduce yourself and then share whatever it is that you're going to share. You have a rad hat on tonight. Oh my God, that's great. Rad hat, rad art behind you, so way cool. Thank you for being here tonight.
For sure. Thank you for having me. It was really great to be asked to do this. I'm Core. I use they, them pronouns, and I am trans, non-binary, agender, gender things. And I have some notes here, so if I keep looking down, that's what it is. So I wanted to focus on the internal coming out process for me, and kind of on my second coming out process as trans. The first coming out process was easier, and it was easier on the way people handled it, but it was harder on my emotional state to begin with. So don't know, wasn't planning on saying that. Anyways, so I met the first non-binary person I met was my freshman year of college. And I met them, and I learned about gender. I learned that trans isn't just male or female, that there's something in between. And I was like, wait, what? That's a thing? You can do that? And my brain kind of started racing, and it it got confused, and then it just went into this place where it was like, okay, this is different, this is something that I can't think about, we're not going to think about it. I'm a freshman in college, I'm about to be in a show, I'm a theater student, and I just don't have time for this. So I had that thought, and then I continued on, and I I just didn't think about it again, and I kind of forgot about it. And then my junior year of college, I something pushed me towards the LGBT community center on Marquette's campus at the time, and I don't know what it was, but when I got there, it was mainly non-binary folks who hung out there, and I felt so comfortable in their presence, and I felt like I connected with a lot of them. And from hearing their stories, I realized that I had been pushing a lot of myself away and aside and to the back. Um, and as I heard these people's stories and connections, I made these connections to my own life. Um, and I didn't want to accept that I have a different gender, because when I was a kid, my mom, whenever I traveled my little tiny body towards the boys section, the men's section, I it was awesome. I'm like, that's where I wanted to go. But my mom would pull me back and be like, you're a girl, you're a girl, you're a girl. And so looking back, that got ingrained in. And that stuck with me always was you're a girl, you're a girl, you're a girl. So when my mind went to the place where I'm not a girl, I kept wanting to freak out and push it away. But something happened junior year, and I just kind of leaned into it. And I was that kind of opened up where oh, sorry, my mind is scrambled. But yeah, so it opened up a spot. So I was in a show at Marquette, Anything Goes, and for it I had to wear a wig, and my hair is thick, super curly, and it was like down to my waist at the time. And someone said, you might have to get a haircut. And in my brain, I was like, this is the time. This is the chop. And so I got to chop off my hair. And that was I think that was the moment that my brain really, really was like, let's do this. Let's do this gender thing. And let's figure out, because I don't think you're a girl. Because the second that I looked in that mirror and I saw all of that hair, that's that long hair that's associated with, being a female. The second that I saw that off, I was like, there's more to this. I can get deeper. I can see myself more clearly. Anyways, that's the beginning of the journey. And one night, after, realizing maybe I should figure out my gender, I went on YouTube, and I went down this YouTube spiral, and I watched a bunch of YouTubers videos trying to figure out what I identified with, trying to find someone who I identified with so I could figure out what's my gender, because I knew I wasn't a girl. That's basically what I knew at the time, was like, I'm not a girl. Don't call me a girl, because it feels bad. So I just went down this binge of YouTube. I was on YouTube for like 8 hours, and and through that time, as I heard people's stories, I picked up little bits and pieces, and it was affirming. And that's when I realized that I decided to call myself non-binary at the time, because that's what felt good. That's what I could, identify with. And it kind of went from this me pushing it away and not telling anybody to me being out, trying to be out and proud. And like literally the next day after this binge research, I told my mom, and I'm like, hey mom, I'm trans. Well, I wasn't using trans at the time. Like, I'm non-binary. This is me. This is what I'm gonna do. Don't worry. Nothing's gonna change. Like, I just want to tell you that I'm not a girl. But you can do whatever. At the time, I was still using my birth name and using my own pronouns, or my old pronouns. And it was fine, right? But that was, again, me pushing it away, because from those videos, I did know that I did not want to use she, her pronouns. I did know that my birth name was not a name that fit me. But I wanted to push it away because I didn't have time to process it. Because that's a lot to process, especially when you are a college student, a senior in college, and you just don't want to process that. But after spending an entire summer just having time to myself, not doing anything for the first time in forever, I realized that I can't hide behind what I've always known. I can't live a life that feels suppressed. And I have to dig out the memories that I've put aside, to dig them out and pull them to the forefront and show the true core. And that was hard. It sounds kind of easy, but not at the same time. But it took a lot. And in my life, I use mindfulness practices, and my mindfulness practice is really what helped me find myself. And even though I had, figured out that I was not a girl, there was something deeper there. And just from observing and journaling and thinking about my life, I realized that I am core. That I should use they them pronouns, because whenever someone refers to me as she, there is a pit in my stomach, and I want to punch a wall, and it doesn't feel like they're talking to me. And I might have gone in circles here, but I guess my point is, my takeaway, my sharingness here is that yes, we all have to come out to other people in our lives, and that's hard. And I mean, I could tell you the journey that it's been to come out as trans to my family, but for me, the coming out to myself has been way more important, way more impactful, and has had more of a weight, and also a lifting of weight, if that makes sense, for me. It, sorry, I lost myself. Because there's things in the world that push us all back into closets, into holes, into whatever you want to call it. There are things that stop us from finding ourselves, that stop us from being our true selves. Like for me, when I was a kid, it was others and it was society. It was my mom following what society has told her, that she has a daughter and that she can only shop in the girls section, right? When I was a teenager, it was the thing that kept me from finding core was the lack of information. I didn't know that people who outside of the binary existed. If I did, life would have been very different. As a young adult in college, it was my busyness, it was my schedule, it was the time I didn't have, it was the lack of time that I had from discovering me that kept me back. And it wasn't until I, you know, had the time and space and nothing else on my schedule that I was able to really find core. And this has come up time and time again in my life. And I, every single day, I think that I know my gender and I know who I am. But whenever I get that time to practice mindfulness or something, I discover something more about myself. And I feel like I feel like I'm coming out to myself every day a little bit, because I discover a little bit of myself every day, a little bit of my identity every day. And yeah, I mean, it's good to think about what holds you back, what holds you back from being your authentic self. Um, that's my coming out knowledge. I have so much more I'd like to say, but that's what I have today, and I think that that's a lot and kind of deep for me, at least.
Yay. Thank you so much. And I'm still fascinated with your picture behind you, and it's really fascinating that you talked about mindfulness um, and your name. Just for me, it's like I don't know if your name comes from like core, like a central core, but it's just that's really fantastic, and I really appreciate hearing your story. I
Thank
do
you.
want to share with folks that Corey, you're going to leave a little bit early tonight, so if you want to share the love other people with Core before they leave, share the love now so they can see all of the good stuff with you. So thank you so much for being here tonight. All right. So the next person that's going to share is Deirdre. And so thank you for being here, and I'll let you introduce and share what you're going to share tonight. Thank you.
So this is really exciting. I've been on lots and lots and lots of trans panels and coming out panels, which maybe is like 8. I mean, like somehow 8 seems like a lot. I am 17 times 3. And I have transitioned twice or 3 times, depending on how you look at it. I grew up in the 80s, 70s and 80s, and I had heard of people who had transitioned from male to female, but not the other way around. In fact, I didn't even know that women could be gay until I went to a friend's party and she said, "Oh, there'll be gay people there. Is that okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't care." And it was all girls. I'm like, all right, let's add this up. So, so I was very naive when I was young, and I didn't really identify as anything. It turns out now that I probably am on the autism spectrum. So it kind of makes sense to me now that I just wasn't really connecting the same way that a lot of kids did. But I was like, well, okay, I'm a girl. Like I just took things at face value. But I decided or learned that I was not a typical girl, and that worked. I had interests shared with a lot of male people, boys, and then later men in college and farther on. A number of years after I graduated high school, I came out as bisexual. I was at a school in Michigan that had a really great coming out group, like support groups. They had like 3 or 4 different support groups, depending on what you were doing. The bisexual group was very small, but the coming out group was very big. And so it was very comfortable and exciting to talk to people in person because the internet had just shown up. Like that year was the transition from, for me, from dial-up to an actual solid internet connection 24/7 when I went back to college. And that was when you could search for transgender and not get porn sites, if that tells you something. That was a long time ago. And there really wasn't very much about people transitioning from female to male, but there was some. And I remember reading stuff from people who had transitioned both ways. And I was like, wow, oh my gosh, this is the thing. And so I had what I've learned is a pretty typical identity freak out that people have when they first discover what their possibilities are. And I really wanted to transition to male eventually. Like I had a while of just interacting with trans people, and at another support group from the same college. And I was just like, yes, I support this. I might be this, but I'm not sure yet. So I guess my identity process took a couple of years, but eventually I did transition. I got a rubber stamp from a psych, which is what you needed back then in order to get testosterone or surgery. And I had both. And I lived as a man for 5 years. And a lot of people don't like that term, lived as a gender. But on the other side of it, I'm not a man and I'm not a woman. And so I identify as non-binary now, but there was no word back then for non-binary. There we could say, I would say in the middle was what I said, in between, in the middle. But that wasn't until after I had been F to M for a while. And I started actually cross-dressing when I was an F to M, meaning I was wearing dresses and makeup. And I was like, this is fun. Like, I don't hate it the way I used to. It was still performative for me. I mean, dressing up in makeup and dresses was usually a performance, but this was a performance that I enjoyed rather than disliked. And then when I would go out like that, people read me as cis female. And I was like, oh, that's so easy, because it was really hard to pass as a guy. I am 5'2", and I was very thin back then. And I put on a lot of muscle with the testosterone, but I live in a very liberal college town, and we have tons of people who are LGB. And at the time, there are not a lot of T's. So people assumed I was a lesbian, a butch lesbian, which is okay in terms of just interacting. But if I was looking for someone to date, it didn't work as well. Even though I was, technically bisexual, I always preferred masculine appearing people. Just, that's my dig. That's my gig. But in terms of coming out, like my friends were all cool. Again, that's that liberal college town thing. I have a much larger social circle in science fiction and fantasy. So like we have sci-fi conventions. We talk about movies and books and art and costuming and all that kind of cool stuff. And they didn't care. There a couple of people had come before me in that same much larger group. But I think that anybody who wasn't interested or thought it was too weird just stayed in their own group and just didn't approach me, just like anybody else. But nothing that I did as a trans person was as weird as the science fiction that we read. And I think that helped. I have perspective. The science fiction community, science fiction, fantasy, it's a much broader community now that involves a lot of computer people too, is made up of a large portion of misfits, as we call ourselves, you know, different or whatever. And so we're a lot slower to judge other people, and we're a lot faster to accept people at face value. I had no trouble getting people to use my new name, or the gender takes a little bit longer, but it clicked. And after living as a man for a while, like I said, I did the cross-dressing, and it was so easy to pass as female again that I thought, if I took another year, I thought about changing back or just stopping. I didn't really have to change back. All I had to do was stop testosterone, and I looked like a girl again. And I use the word girl not only for myself. I do not refer to other women as girls. So please don't take that the wrong way. But yeah, I looked like a woman. I stopped testosterone. I started bleeding like 5 weeks later. I was so furious. That was like periods have always been traumatic to me, and it has nothing to do with gender. Okay, it's always been physically traumatic for me and emotionally traumatic. And then I let my hair grow a little bit, and everyone was like, wow, oh my gosh, you look so nice. Because they thought I was a guy transitioning for the first time to be a woman. And they're like, you look so good, you're so pretty, I love your voice, you know? And I'm just like, like, what do I want to talk about? What do I want to say to strangers? And this was people where I worked, because I worked at a big grocery store, a huge grocery store. And I had a lot of regular customers who saw me. And those are the people who said, you look so nice, everything. I did come out as male to female to the whole store with a letter, an FAQ, that had some things like, oh my God, where is it? Oh, my tab, lost my tab. But anyways, it was like, you know, hi, I'm doing this thing, I'm changing, I'm gonna start looking different. But here's the name I want you to use, which is Deirdre, and let's use she and her instead of he and him. And the first question was, I thought you were already a girl. And my answer would be, in that case, continue. You know, so I tried to make it very light, and it was very light. But even with that, even with the thing in it that said, it's not polite to ask people about body parts you can't see, the very first question I got from one of my teammates was, so what are you going to do about down there? You know, this sort of rough on the surface woman that I worked with. And I was just like, because I couldn't begin to explain that there was nothing to do. So there you go. I wasn't mad, because it's just hard to make me mad about things like that. I knew that questions would be weird all the time. And I just love coming out. I love educating people and advocating one-on-one, because I'm not a public speaker, like publicly known. I don't have a big platform, but I meet a lot of different people. And so I've always felt like if I can keep coming out to individuals over and over and over again, that'll spread, you know, the good news or whatever you want to call it, and help people so that the next time they see somebody, or if they know somebody who knows somebody, that it's easier. And of course, that was, my gosh, that was 2005 when I transitioned back to female and basically just stopped all my stuff, all my hormones. And I got a little padded bra, you know, until I decided what size I wanted. And I did eventually get implants, because it helps fit in better. That's basically it. I don't identify as a woman, but because I look so feminine, unless I work really, really hard at it, it's easy for me to let strangers treat me as a woman. And that was something that was hard earned. I was not able to do that before I transitioned to male. The first like 4 years of being F to M, post-transition, post-medical transition, it was hard. I did not like being referred to as a woman. It was shocking and uncomfortable, and I had to tell people over and over and over again. I'm like, no, 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 no. This is, please, oh, I'm a guy, stuff like that. But it was the fact of experimenting with femininity as a man, and then also the happiness. What was it the Course said? That type of just being, the stuff that Marsha Linehan teaches. But I'd learned it long before I got her training. That just sort of being allowed me to sort of calm in myself and take my own opinions as being the most important one. So the opinions from other people, especially strangers, are mostly inconsequential to me. But it wasn't always that way. And like I say, I'm a lot older than someone who's in college right now, or who was in college 10 years ago. It's the numbers add up, and it gets a little surreal. Yeah, so when I transitioned back to female, my best friend said, that's fine, but I'm not learning another name. And I'm like, that's fine. Like, I can't think of a third name. Okay, let's just go back to Deirdre. That's my birth name. And I always liked it. And it actually trained me for coming out, because people have always mispronounced it 9 times out of 10. And so I had to come out with the proper pronunciation. And so that trained me from childhood, basically, to say, oh, my name is Deirdre, not Deidre, Deirdre, Deirdre, Dee. So it was good practice. And usually I'm funnier than this. I just got a little tense today. Too many appointments, too much going on this year. So please don't let me be a downer. But it was good. Like my friends have been so great, and some of them were confused, but they were still fantastic. I've been so lucky to have such good friends and such a good community around me, because my parents stopped talking to me. And what's funny is that my sex change, my gender change, my transition was like the 3rd or 4th huge disappointment that I had given them about my life. So like, I dropped out of college. Oh my God, like they were gonna die. And then I came out as bisexual, and they're like, that's the cult of your town, your hometown, your college town. It's Ann Arbor, Michigan. All right, yes, it's a very hippie town, very hippie dippy, as we say sometimes. And I don't mean anything bad about hippies, because they're great. They're great people. But yeah, they thought I had succumbed to the cult of Ann Arbor. I got married too soon. That was probably the number 2 in terms of huge lifetime disappointments. And he was a jackass. And it didn't last very long, because I'm not that dumb, but I was very young and impulsive and naive. So we're just learning experience. And yeah, and the bisexual and the trans thing. And then my father started snooping on my live journal and found out some of my sexual practices, which are not vanilla. And then somehow that made it worse, even though he knew he shouldn't be reading it. Like, that's just a whole different thing about parental boundaries. But my friends have always been there. My friends have always been here. They're great. Let me just go to the thing that I found to put at the very beginning when I was taking notes for this. was that when I transitioned to female, I was up at the front desk of the grocery store, and one of my coworkers, who was a friend of mine, came up, and I was there with another young woman, and he said, "Well, hello, ladies." And my face, I must have just given him the death look, some kind of, because he was like, "What?" And I was just like, never mind, because I just didn't want to get into it. But the thing is, my tagline is, I never was a lady. Before, I was never a lady. When I was a guy, I never was a lady. Now I'm just not a lady. Like, please, like, that word doesn't describe me, but neither does guy, dude, man, bro. That's like, I'm not those gentlemen. I'm definitely no gentleman. It's like some line I read somewhere. He says, I may be an a-hole, but I'm not that kind of a-hole. So, like, I have my abrasive side, I guess. Not a lady. Thanks.
Thank you. And we've known each other for a really long time, so I've definitely been part of that journey for you from a remote way, and so it's very cool to hear this in a I don't know, condensed sort of way. So I really appreciate you sharing, because your story is not atypical, but oftentimes not talked about when folks transition. And
One more tiny thing. There was when I was detransitioning, as some people called it, I managed to find a top secret Yahoo group that you had to eat. I don't know how I found out about it, but I did. And I emailed them, and they're like, okay, you can be in our group. You can talk to other people who are detransitioning or stopping transition or whatever. But it was like the detransition group, top secret. You had to swear not to tell anybody about anything that went on there, because everybody was afraid, and still is sometimes, that if you go back from a transition, that it what's the word, that it takes away the value of people who transition binary.
right.
It devalues the transition process, and it delegitimizes other people, which I don't believe that it does. And I'm just so glad that now, like, the new generation of people coming in and transitioning are so free and open with it. They have so much information, and it helps us. It's not just for them, but it helps the older folks too, because when we start to feel a little different, a little not so perfect, we have role models. We have young role models. I'm so happy. Like, I'm just so much happier with the way things are going.
Yeah, it is beautiful. And you referenced dial-up, and many of us remember those dial-up days, and the world is really different. And I really, I think part of why I appreciate your story and your stories so much is that I think that sometimes people think about detransition as a failure or a sadness, and I don't see that in you. And it's so beautiful just to say, hey, I made this choice, I made this other choice, and this is all good. And so I really appreciate that voice out in the world, and that you were able to share that with the small group of us tonight. So thank you very much. So I know it's 7 o'clock. We have 2 more speakers. And I think that Sean is up next. And let me invite to ask. All right, way cool. And so Sean joined us a little teeny bit late tonight, but is here. So yay. I've also known Sean for a really long time too. So it's good to see you. Really good to see you. And you're muted. So you want to unmute, please, before you talk. And I'm going to let you share what you want to share, and I'll be back.
All right. Well, thank you, Michael, for inviting me. As Michael has stated, we've known each other a really long time. And to give folks an idea of how long we've known each other, it's like 20 years. But just to kind of quickly put my transition into context, I'm 51 years old. I'm kind of a unusual pup of sorts where I knew at a really very early age that I was male, and had gotten into arguments about it with my mother. But I just assumed that something was wrong and I was female because that's what she kept on telling me that I was. I grew up in Hempstead, New York, which is part of Long Island. And so the New York Newsday in the 70s used to, in their TV guides, used to advertise for sex changes. And so I became aware of the concept of changing genders really early on. And I want to say like 6, 7, 8, like whenever I could understand the words and what they meant. And the 70s was a much different age than we have now. I mean, I think that folks are aware that we live in a conservative environment. The information that we have, if you took a common sexuality class in college, that information was accessible to high school students. And so my brother, who's 8 years older than I am, came home from high school with a sexuality book, and the sexuality book had information about gender reassignment. And not only did it have information about transsexuals, but they actually had pictures. And so I think my inner fag looked at some of the rudimentary phalluses that were being done in the 70s, and I went, oh no, I think I must be female. And that was around the time that I became aware of a lesbian identity, and I just assumed that because I liked girls, that that's where I was. And so I try to fit in, and I knew at that time that I had to be really very quiet about my identity and my sexuality. I was teased mercilessly because I didn't fit in assigned gender roles. And of course, when you're in a public school system, kids dominate over one another. And so when I look at that past, for a long time, it was very painful. And I used to kind of carry that bullied identity, as a chip on my shoulder. But of course, now as an adult, I look at it as more of like, it helped me to get to where I am today. So, which is a therapist. But anyway, and so one of the most poignant memories that I have of that period was I had transferred into the 5th grade from a public school to a parochial school. And my former classmates would have to walk past the parochial school to get to the public school. And they saw me in Catholic school garb, which was a skirt. And for 3 days in a row, my old classmates saw me, stood at the fence and laughed at me. And it was, my birth name was Jennifer, or is Jennifer. And so it was like, look at her, and, which is kind of interesting now, like even they knew then that there was something odd about me in a skirt. And then of course, because I wasn't really fitting into the gender roles at school, I was having problems there fitting in too, because the girls were interested in dating boys and putting on makeup, and that's not where I was. And so it was a really very lonely period. And eventually my parents, we moved down to Virginia, which brought up other issues around class and race and whatnot. And, but my lifeline was that we were very close to the Washington, D.C. area. And eventually I was able to get a fake ID and start going to the gay bars, which for me, that was my identity. And I was able to do that my senior year in high school. And so getting through high school and college, that was what I was doing. But after I got out of college, I just felt like the wolf in sheep's clothing, like this isn't a good fit. I don't really know where I'm at. And looking back, really, I had just kind of put a lot of my feelings around my gender identity, just down. you know. And so one of my friends in college, who's like my boy, you know, like my best buddy, came up to me and said, you know what, I know we haven't talked about this, but I really feel like I'm a guy and I just want to let you know, this is what I'm going to explore. And it hit me like a rock, because that was around the time that I was starting to think like, okay, there's something really off and I don't know what it is. And I feel masculine and I don't feel, I'm not in touch with anything that's female. And so about 2 weeks later, I gave him a call up and I said, you know what you said, that's who I am. And so that was 1997. And this was a much different world back then. The internet was still relatively new in terms of a consumer used service. People were connecting in AOL chat rooms, and we weren't quite the. So here in DC, you know, he knew one person that was born with intersex conditions. That guy and another transsexual who worked at PFLAG at that moment, which is Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, they started a group that, you know, that initially started by meeting in somebody's living room. That group now is still going. It's being hosted by Whitman Walker in Washington, D.C. And it's called DCATS, DC Area Transmasculine Society. And again, it was just word of mouth. Like one person meets another person and it's a group of others. And it was like a small little kind of cubmate kind of thing. We were aware of what had happened in Nebraska with Brandon Tina. And there had been somebody who, and I never found out who it was, who had come out as trans and had started hormones, and then somebody in his community raped him and had left. So there was always that kind of, that level of violence that was a shadow. You know, we were aware that, you know, I don't want to say there was a subversive element to it, but we were just kind of aware of the violence that our community oftentimes gets exposed to because we're other. And so I ended up going to, in 1997, there used to be a conference called the Black Lesbian Gay Leadership Forum. And so I went in that conference and I bought a suit. Of course, like, look at that suit now and was like, I don't know what I was thinking, but it was like a female's, you know, very masculine suit because I still didn't know shit. And, but that was like my coming out as Sean. And I picked Sean because it was a name that I had had a couple people call me in a bar, and it was kind of gender neutral. If I had to make the change all over again, I never would have chosen Sean. But you know, it's a name that stuck for me for 25 years, and it's just syllables. Like you know, I don't care. I was in a situation, one, because I was raised in an African-American family, and my father was considerably older, and so there was a lot of discussion about what it was like to grow up as Black in the legacy of the Depression with segregation. In my family, we had left the country during the 60s civil rights movement. So as a result, I was born in India. My brother and sister were born in Nepal because my father had to look for opportunities that just weren't here in America. And so for me, it was always, you know, put in my head as to, I had to think about my future. I always had to make sure that I could eat, I could take care of myself. And I had been given this tremendous opportunity, which was to go to college and to have the luxury of deciding on a career that I wanted to do. My dad never had that choice. He just did something that was going to feed his family. And so I wanted to be a television director. I originally had wanted to run political campaigns, but I knew, I knew that there was something about me that was going to change, and I didn't, I couldn't go that way. But so I eventually went into working in live TV news, and I, wanted to be a television director. And by the time I was 27, I met that goal. I was working for one of the larger cable companies, and they were sending me out to the conventions, and I was also working at Fox News too. So, I was, doing very well. At the very least, everybody knew I was a lesbian, and I was very conscious of what my life would look like if I came out as Sean. And long story made short, for the purpose of time, in 1998, I became aware of a conference called True Spirit. That was how I met Michael. Michael had been on hormones for, I want to say, about 4 or 5 years by the time I met him. And that conference changed my life. And I'd never been in a space with more than a handful of folks that were on conferences, that were on hormones, and to be in a space of over 100 people who came from all different types of walk of life from all over the country, and go, wow, this is my community. But at the same time, that community, that generation had so much pain. There was so much loss. There was so much, like, you go into a space and people literally, would, they would tell you about how they lost their kids, how they lost their jobs. There was a level of resiliency that this generation have, that all generations have. But, of course, this is my generation, so I'm going to make it huge. But Michael was the one that was organizing the workshops, and it was called True Spirit. It's no longer in existence. And and so he had workshops on titled, The Shot Heard Across the World, and it was about testosterone education. There was another workshop about chest surgery. The chest surgeries that were done back then were awful. If you were lucky enough to get to a good doctor, you were lucky. There were other doctors that were not. They were pulling out the breast tissue, but they weren't sculpting. And so, and there were people that were going to folks that were barely accredited. So, and they also had workshops. There was one I remember about, when is it enough? And it was about folks that were still struggling to identify as male, and having to go through surgery or hormones or whatever, and just not feeling self-satisfied. And so there was a range of experiences, there was a range of identities. And so I started to keep going. And so that was 1998. I want to say there was about 150 people at that conference. By the time that the conference exploded, which was, by that point, I was one of the co-chairs, we had over 1,000 attendees in Washington, DC. We had a film festival. We had rap groups. We had, space for, femmes to talk about, how their identity had changed from being in the lesbian community to being with the trans guy. It was crazy. It was like this weekend-long emporium in the heart of DC. And long story made short, as I had mentioned before, we come from a resilient community. There are a lot of folks that live with mental health issues. I don't know that many trans people who do not suffer from depression, anxiety, or complex PTSD. I suffer from all three. That's just the way it is. But what ended up with me, so the conference we ended up having a snowstorm, and the conference just, imploded. They couldn't find anybody else that was going to be willing to put that much effort into it. And it just gotten so large, it couldn't continue to be volunteer driven. And the board did not support folks, so in the way that it should have. But in terms of my identity, was struggling because I was a television director. And I was afraid that if I came out as trans, first of all, there weren't that many Black female directors. There certainly weren't that many, I think I was one of Black female lesbian directors in DC working in TV news. How were they going to handle me if I transitioned? And long story made short, I held on for 5 years. And in 2001, my partner dumped me. I got a major depression from being dumped. I then got passed over for a promotion, and then 9/11 happened, and I was directing on the day of 9/11. And as I previously mentioned, I'm from New York. And I couldn't get over the fact that, one, I was working in an environment where the Trade Center would be up, the Trade Center would be down, the Trade Center would be up, it'd be down. And that shock of going, holy shit, and then realizing that one of my childhood friends who lived next door and would always I'd get his hand-me-downs, died in the attack. He was a second generation firefighter. And there's something about those childhood connections where you're dealing with other people who just see you as you are. And he would give me like his helmets and, you know, football helmets or whatever when he grew out of them. And my mother and I would get into a power exchange and she would take them away from me. But I'd get to keep his clothes. And I couldn't get out of bed. And I cried for days. And I realized if we were going to die, then I was going to not die miserable. And so by that January, I was on hormones. So here I am now, 20 years later. I like to tell folks I was freelance production staff with Fox News. I transitioned there. They were incredibly supportive, you know, and everybody knew I was liberal. You know, a lot of folks that work there are liberal. Some of my greatest colleagues still work there. I stayed in TV production until 2009. One of the things that I had gotten out of the conference was that I felt, as much as I love LGBT, you know, community, our conflict resolution skills sucked. Mine sucked at that time. Other people sucked at that time. And I wanted to learn how to improve myself and hopefully create a space in which people could get together and be able to handle our conflict, you know, because oftentimes, you know, we just start calling each other names. You're anti-sex, you're this and that. And it's just, you know, we take on all of the worst behaviors that we're exposed to from the larger community, whether or not the isms, and we focus it on each other. And it's shitty, and it, you know, we can do better. So anyway, now I'm a social worker. I work full-time for the elderly. I'm also in private practice. About a third of my clientele are LGBT. A third of my practice are heterosexual clients, cisgender heterosexual clients who don't know me or my identity. And then about a third are working with cisgender males, particularly around anxiety and anger. And so for me, I changed my life twice. I had this massive identity change in terms of how I present my gender. I've changed my careers. Oh, I take that back. I've changed it 3 times because I then also entered sobriety, which allowed me to love myself in a way that I had never thought possible. And because I came into universal love. And once I kind of got into that, once I came into that, all of my relationships over this last year particularly have changed. And but the greatest source of pride that I get is from being a gender whisperer, is from working with cisgender males and going, it's okay to cry. You know, the fact that you're expressing your anger through hitting things or hitting your wife, which you shouldn't be doing, you know, that's toxic masculinity and it's not work. And the fact that you're here with me says to me, you are ready to change. So let's do this walk. I have a job where I get to do couples counseling. I had 2 cisgender people, literally, and we're working on how to get them connected. Literally, the cisgender female turns to the male and goes, he's not eating my pussy enough. And then for 20 minutes, we're talking about their power exchange about whether or not she's getting licked. It doesn't get much better than that. So, you know, for me, my generation, what I've seen is that reason why we're so scary to other people is because we let them know that their assumptions about identity, something that they thought was fixed, actually really isn't fixed. And we come into this world with so much trauma because of how other people are treating us, because they pick up that there's something different. That part of what our journey is role modeling for other people how we should be treated. And I love my work. I love my brothers like Michael Munson. He and I have not always have gotten along, but we've been able to come back together. And when I see him, my heart just explodes. So when he said, hey, I know this is last minute, are you free? And I went, I'll do it, you know, because I love him and I'm going to make that time. That's what community does. The female to male transsexual community is so much smaller than the trans community in general. We suffer from a high rate of suicide. All of us have had friends that have committed suicide. So we have to hold on to each other and we have to support each other in ways that most other communities don't. We also have folks who will stop taking testosterone. I had a friend who was on testosterone 2 or 3 years before me, was on for 20, and then calls me up and says, you know what? I wouldn't have done this if I hadn't been gang raped. It blew my mind. I always thought that we were the same. I love you, regardless of whatever you want me to call you. It's going to take me a while to realize that, okay, I thought you were one of my cup mates, but I can rework that. I'll start calling you they. You know, it's not grammatically correct, but I'll do that, you know, because again, part of the journey is that not everybody is going to present as who they were the year before. Part of our journey is around, you know, realizing that happiness is right here. It's not a destination. And there are some folks, again, like me, who are gender whisperers, who are going to shed their skin. And we need to always make space for these folks because their suicide rate is higher than the F to M community. And we don't often talk about it because we're so busy talking about the violence on the male to female side that we get overlooked. Because when we get killed and our corpses are left in the bodies that we were born with. And the news media doesn't know. When we do sex work, it's not always as a male. It will a lot of times be as presenting as female. So anyway, I could keep running my mouth. I've got some dogs who need to go out. So I don't know. I think there's one more speaker after me. So anyway, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sean. And obviously, True Spirit changed a lot of people's lives. And
We need
yeah.
to do a book. You've heard me say this to you before, or a documentary, because good gosh, you know what I mean? You
Yeah.
know, that
Well,
was
all of us are still alive. We need to do it before we all get even older than we are, right? So,
yeah, I mean, literally, our community is dying.
unlike Dezjorn, who's like young and snappy and all those good things, right? So,
Right. So, and I apologize for, being overly sexual. Hopefully people are,
we are adults. We can all hear those words. We all got it. So, thank you very much for spending your night with us. Go tend to your pups.
So do you want me to stay on, or because I wasn't quite too sure.
I think we're almost out of time. So, we're going to listen to Dezjorn and then we're going to kick off for the night. So, cool. Thank you. So Dezjorn, our snappy dresser, we are going to hang out for a little bit longer. Hopefully all of our folks can stay with us because your story is cool and we love you too. And you have a good tie and all of those good things. So I'm going to turn things over to you. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you. Can you all hear me okay? I want to make sure you all can hear me. Alrighty, so in the, perfect, thank you. In the chat box, to make this a little bit easier, I'm gonna go ahead and just send some links and stuff like that. And I'll be quick, don't worry. I've had this happen before, so no worries at all. As Michael said, I am Dezjorn, and I'm probably most well known from the Barney's New York campaign that has went international. That was a modeling gig that turned into something that was like world renowned. And that's pretty much where my story kind of comes from. But we can go and backtrack that all the way to the age of 5. So at about 5 years old, I knew exactly what was going on. I just couldn't put a term to it for multiple reasons. One, simply because I was very young and my vocabulary was probably about like that big. And then additionally, just because at the time, I feel like, we didn't necessarily have the internet going as great as it was. And I couldn't put an actual term to it. But as I progressed and went into high school, as many of our other speakers spoke on, it was that term that could then be Googled. And I had a friend of mine as well that said, hey, I really think this might be what's going on, but of course, you have to pick for yourself. You got to figure it out on your own. But I think this might be a term that connects with you, and that word was trans. And so I went and I Googled, right? Like this is when I got super tech savvy, and I YouTubed and AOL at the time, right? And I'm messaging everyone like, hey, has anybody else heard of this term? Anybody know what's going on here? And a lot of people had no idea what I was talking about. It was just me and my one friend, and then maybe another friend here or there that also identified that way. And I'm like, okay, so it's just like us three. Like that's what I thought in the beginning. I thought it literally was just like me, myself, and I, and then like my one friend over there that would identify that way. And I did a lot of modeling. I've been modeling since I have been 6 months old. And when I say modeling, I mean literally for top brands from Huggies to Kohl's department store, those of you that live in Wisconsin here, to Popeye's chicken. I mean, every brand that you could really think of, I pretty much had my toes in. And this Barney's campaign came along, and I said, now this could be very interesting. This could either go great or this could be terrible. And the reason why I say that is because I hadn't quite told everybody. My father knew when I was in pretty much elementary school what was going on. He knew that I didn't like clothing to have a gender or anything in between that I would identify with masculine, air quote, norms, as for lack of better words. And that was pretty much it. And as I went to cast for the Barney's New York campaign, that campaign was specific with having all trans cast. telling their story, having their photographs, showing literally what we know as the hashtag trans is beautiful. And I was like, okay, let's go about and do it. I had the resume, right? I had everything that I basically needed to basically lock in that job. And indeed, that's exactly what happened. And as we go forward, additionally, I pretty much came out to the world. I did not come out to one person like my mom, how some people send an email or write a letter, or say, hey, we have to sit down and talk. I didn't do any of that. So my mom, who has now passed, but she was pretty much the only person that like didn't figure it out. And she found out from CNN. So again, very interesting from my mother's standpoint to find out about your child transitioning through a huge news source, right? And some people kind of look at me and ask, you know, was that the best thing? Could I have done things a different way? And in the link that I had sent, there's American Transition, which is the docuseries. There's about a 30-minute documentary on the relationship with me and my mom, and I discussed this. So I encourage you all to watch that if you want to learn a little bit more on that side, just for time's sake. But I went about it in a language that my mom would understand. My mom was the one that got me started with modeling, and this was a way for her to understand what exactly was going on without having the anger and a lot of the confusion happen. And as we move forward now here into 2018, 2018, what year am I in? In 2018 is when I came out with something that I was just about to say. 2020, I'm a very proud and out Black trans man that I'm advocating for my community, my family, and so forth. So in short, I had my surgery in 2014 as far as top surgery goes. And I additionally had my name change all in that same year. 2017, I married my beautiful wife, who has actually been alongside with me throughout my whole transition, which is also another rare case that you don't usually see within our community. I have been with my partner the whole time, and I am blessed to have that. I'm very thankful to have her by my side as she continues with my journey right now. So that's pretty much kind of how my situation happened. Again, I have submitted links in the chat box. And, you know, Michael, we do a lot of this a lot of times, and I'm more than happy to always share more bits and pieces of my story. All of our viewers and listeners, I'm more than happy for you to inbox or email me. Dezjorn International is open for that. We are a conglomerate firm. I have multiple things going on inside of Dezjorn International. And I'm here for the youth. I'm here to help out my babies. I tell everyone, you know, I stand and do what I do with the media and magazines and modeling and being a mogul and everything in between, all for my kids that are coming up. I want the best for you all. As you've heard some of our elders on this call say, we have it a little bit easier. And I want to make sure that we can continue that, making things very normal for you, because you are normal, you're beautiful, you're great, and I'm all here for it.
Dezjorn, thank you so much. And there's so many things in there that I didn't know about you, which is really fantastic. And I know that we are past our time. So thank you for everybody for sticking with us tonight. And thank you everybody for sharing your stories. So Core and Deirdre and Sean and Dezjorn, all of you are just so incredibly beautiful. And as Dezjorn just said, you know, trans is beautiful, and you are all really fantastic. So I really appreciate everybody sharing so heartfelt stories. So, and Dezjorn, we should talk about you coming back and sharing some more, having some more time. So let's talk offline about that. And thank you to our interpreters. All right, everybody, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your evening.